Book One was about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have a special guest. She's the author of the book Game On in Is Management Your Best Career Play? No other than Ms. Joanne Merrick.
Hi, Daniel. Nice to be here. Hi, everyone.
Welcome. Welcome to Book 101, Miss Joanne. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. Well, I like to let everyone know that my accent is Australian. So if I don't
Yes.
do that, Daniel, they're wondering what my accent is and why they're wondering why my accent is. They're not really listening to anything I'm saying. So,
We love your accent, Miss
yes,
Joanne. No
thank you. It's
worries.
got a slight American twang. So based in the United States right now. Yes, Australian. My background, I actually started in the legal area. I was a legal secretary or executive assistant, as I think they call it these days. And I went back to school. I completed a Bachelor of Behavioral Science part time while working full time. It just took me 10 years, but I eventually got there. And I started working at a company that's very familiar with a lot of people called Deloitte in the consulting function, and I was head of learning and development for them for a period of time and got a lot of global exposure during that time. And I eventually moved to Hong Kong. Lived in Hong Kong for 3.5 years, working with a company called Juniper Networks that I know a lot of people are very familiar with as well. I was with Juniper in Hong Kong for 3.5 years, and then they relocated me here to the United States. So from there, I went to Amazon, another company that's very familiar to a lot of people
Yes. Yes.
in the Kindle or the devices function. And from there, got into healthcare with Omnicell. From there, into marketing software with Six Sense. So now I am founder of the Leadership Recipe since about October of 2023, and really proud of launching my book just in the last couple of weeks. Game On is Management Your Best Career Play. Completely passionate about all things management and leadership, and want to do whatever I can to leave a, leave a legacy, but also kind of give back and really help people make these really important career conversations, particularly as it pertains to whether they should enter a management role or not. So that's why I wrote the book.
Miss Joanne Merrick, thank you so much for sharing your game on to the world.
Thank
So
you.
tell us what is all about game on.
Yeah, well, I called it Game On is Management Your Best Career Play because I liken it to our career being a little bit of a game, albeit a very serious game. But there's many variables to your career. You know, there's not only doing what you are great at, but also doing what you love. The mantra "loving what do what you love and love what you do" shines throughout the whole book. And I wanted to have a bit of fun with the topic, albeit it being a very serious topic as well. So I found that in my 20 something years in management and leadership development, that a lot of individual contributors were great at what they were doing. And because they were great at what they were doing, their leaders or other people that they worked with thought, well, you're a great, whatever individual contributor, you would be a great manager. And from my experience, that's not always the case. And, a lot of people do what I call a trustful exercise by, entering the world of management without really knowing what the role itself entails. And, as I say in the book, just because you're great at your individual contributor role doesn't necessarily mean you'll be a great manager. So the book is really about detailing the what of management. It's not the how of management, because that would be 20 books, but it's definitely the what. And it details the role in terms of what to expect from the role, some of the misconceptions that are out there. It details what can possibly go wrong. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong if you enter a management role without really doing the research prior to. So I articulate all of that. And then I get into what are some of the key management skills that folks can kind of even start working on in their current individual contributor roles if they really choose to go down a management path. And there's even an assessment in there. So it's a self assessment that I've also just loaded up to my website. It's a free assessment of, of all of the key management skills that I've identified, what you enjoy doing or how much you enjoy engaging in those skills. And then I ask folks to do a bit of a self assessment around their current skill level around each of those skills. And they will end up with a form of a development plan that they can put in place now in their current roles as individual contributors. And it's something that will do them really well when and if they do decide to go into a management role at some point in the future.
Beautifully articulated, Miss Joanne. Very well said. So, how did you come up with the concept of using a game metaphor for exploring career decisions?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities between playing a game and playing the game that is your career. But just like playing any game, being a manager takes a lot of practice. It Practice makes perfect. The old analogy that amateurs practice to get things right, but professionals they still practice. It's just to keep from getting things wrong. So there are different areas of or similarities between a career and in management and also playing a game. There's the environment in which you play the game and there's the environment in which you work. There's characters within the game and there's characters that you work with on a day-to-day basis. There are things going on in the background, such as level ups or opportunities to engage in different skills, to enter different elements or different areas of a game, just like there is in a career. There's lots of similarities between careers and playing a game. The adage with the book is just to make sure that you get the game of your career right, and that you go into playing the game that is your career with all of the information that you need to be as successful as you possibly can. So that's why I chose the analogy. I also figured that my readers might relate more to a gaming analogy, given most managers actually enter the world of management around their late 20s, maybe early 30s. The challenge with that, though, is that typically they're not trained in their roles until they're in their 40s, in their management roles until they're in their 40s. So the risk there is that we can go through like 10 years of our career without actually being formally trained in the role, which in itself is actually pretty scary. And I'm sure that no one would really want to take on a game that they didn't feel really comfortable with and that they were going to do their very best in. And that was the idea about the book, that people were given all of the information that they needed upfront in order to play the best possible career game they could. There, Daniel, there's the analogy there.
Certainly, certainly, Miss Joanne, totally agree. In your experience, what are the most common misconceptions about being a manager?
Yeah, there's a few. I think the main one, or one of the main ones, is that management is a natural a next career step for everybody, and that's not always the case. Management isn't for everybody, and the challenge with that is that some people move into a management role without maybe doing some of the real research as to what it's all about, and then they get into the role and they're unhappy. And because the nature of being a great manager involves you having working very closely with other people, particularly your direct reports, if you're miserable in your role, guess what, right? That is going to obviously impact the people that you're working with, ultimately your direct reports. So I don't want that to happen to anybody. So that's one of the other reasons I wrote the book as well. I think another misconception is that management is all about delegation. You actually need to do less work, not more work, when you've got people that are reporting to you. That's
Sure.
actually not the case either, because your role as an individual contributor, and I lay this out in the book really clearly. Your role as an individual contributor is very, very different to your role as a manager. As an individual contributor, it's typically all about you. your results, the work that you're doing, the relationships that you're creating or generating with other people, your outputs or your outcomes. And as a manager, it's not about you anymore. It's all about you enabling the best in other people and getting them to do work, sometimes work that they don't want to do, right? And that's not fun
Yes.
for anybody. So it's actually less about delegation and more about engaging and empowering and motivating folks to do sometimes work that they don't really want to do. And as I said, it's not about you anymore as a manager. It's all about everybody else and getting other people to to thrive and do their best work.
So, how does the book help readers decide if management is the right path for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way I designed the book is really to take on the reader's perspective and take them through a journey and a decision making journey. So it articulates up front all of the things that can possibly go wrong when you might take on a management role. And it talks about horrible bosses. I don't know about you, Daniel, but I've certainly had some horrible bosses in my in my time. I've also had some
Likewise.
fabulous bosses. So it kind of articulates everything that could go wrong. And it's not to say that those horrible bosses are bad people, because they're just not. They're no doubt trying their best. I believe that they've just kind of got themselves into a situation in their current roles where they're struggling, where they're feeling overwhelmed, and they're just not maybe reaching out to the people that they could be reach or should be reaching out to help. And they don't necessarily have the skills that they need to be the best managers that they can be. So management is, in my view, a lifelong journey of learning. It's a, a lifelong learning opportunity, and it doesn't stop no matter how much experience you have as a manager. So it starts off in that realm, but then it gets very, very quickly into, well, what's the impact that the role of a manager might have, and why do people want to be managers as well? And they're the two questions that I ultimately ask readers to answer, as well as go through a self reflection, self assessment of where they're at now in terms of the current key management skills that I've identified, and then ultimately encourages them to put together a development plan to work on things that they can now, even in their individual contributor roles, to be future great managers. There's obviously an out, maybe from what people are reading, they're not happy or they don't think that they might want to be a manager at the moment. And that's fine too. That's just great information to have, because it's not saying never, it's just maybe saying not now. But they're going into making this really important career decision with their eyes wide open. So if they do decide to take on a management role in the future, they'll have the confidence and the capability to do so and be set up much more for success than they might have been if they hadn't read my book.
Certainly, very well said, Miss Joanne. Very well said. So, can you describe a scenario from the book that illustrates a real turning point for an aspiring manager?
Sure. I talk about a concept in the book called inner leadership. And for me, inner leadership is, well, look, it encompasses a couple of things, but predominantly self reflection, self awareness, integrity, and doing the right thing, even if it's not something that feels really comfortable. And the example I give in the book is I was actually asked at Amazon while I was working there to be a speaker at a conference of executives around the topic of career growth. And this was a topic that I felt really, really comfortable with. I delivered a lot of programs on this and knew the content very, very well. So I felt comfortable. But given the nature of the audience, this was Jeff Bezos, or some of Jeff Bezos's direct reports. I wanted to really shine in this session and I really wanted to make an impact. So I put together a scenario of something a little bit different. And I knew I was kind of putting myself out on a limb there. And as I was preparing for the session, for some reason, I was getting more and more nervous. And maybe it had something to do with the high caliber audience. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that I wanted to do something a little bit different. I don't know. But I did find myself getting more and more nervous. And to be honest, Daniel, I wanted to run. I wanted to flee. I wanted to get out of that situation. But I knew I also had an important message to get out there. And so I went to the conference. I was the closing speaker, so I was getting more and more nervous as everyone else was doing their presentations. And this wasn't something I was used to, by the way. I would get normally I would get excited about presenting, but so this was completely new for me. And I was sitting there, and it became my turn to give my presentation. And I went up the back of the room, and I started to sing, and I sang, "When the red, red robin comes bop, bop, bopping along." You might know that song, Daniel. I'm not sure, but it's an
Yes,
oldie but a
indeed.
goodie. And I got the whole conference. There was like 100 people or so singing along with me as I walked to the back of the stage. One of the executives actually uh, took up his phone and started recording me, so I knew that I'd done something to kind of surprise everybody. But my whole premise with that was in a previous life, I was a singer, pardon me, a singer, and I used to love to sing. But I've sung in rock and roll bands my whole life, but I could never, I was never going to be, the next Taylor Swift. It just wasn't my, just wasn't my calling. So
True.
what I ended up doing was incorporating singing into some of the learning or leadership development programs that I was facilitating with folks, and I did that for a reason. Um, I wanted to make the learning experience different. I wanted to make the learning experience for my participants to be something that they would remember for everyone, for everywhere, for forever and
Forever.
forever. And so I believe that's what I did. But my whole message there was do what you love and love what you do. And if you can't exactly, do what you love and love what you do, find a way to incorporate what you love into what you do every single day. So, from a management perspective, I believe that I demonstrated that inner leadership, that integrity, that I've put my name on this. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to stand out, and I'm going to, do what I said I was going to do. And I think that is a really important thing for potential managers to keep in mind, that often what they might need to do in the future is the right thing. Maybe it's not something that they feel comfortable with, but it's having the integrity to to stand your ground and do what you really want to do, what you really love to do, have the impact that you want to have, and leave a legacy with people that are reporting or have reported to you in a memorable way.
Certainly. So, what advice do you give to high performing employees who feel pressured into a management roles?
Do your research, really get a clear understanding of what the role itself entails, so that when and if you do decide to move into a management role, you're walking into it with your eyes wide open, and you're not doing that trustful exercise that so many folks do. Because ultimately, if you do get into a role like that, you'll need to make it work, which is going to be a lot more, which is going to be a lot harder for you than any research that you might want to do. Also, look at the role with the perspective of actually doing that job. And from that, I mean, I think we look at our managers right now, and I don't think we see what they do, but we there's a lot of behind the scenes work that our managers are doing that we may not necessarily be privy to, such as performance management conversations, talent reviews, succession planning, those sorts of things. And it's those sorts of things that take up a lot of time and effort. It's about having and feeling comfortable having difficult conversations with with folks, and that's often something that a lot of people don't want to do or shy away from. But that's the important work that managers do and what managers need to do.
Certainly. Thank you for your advice, Miss Dion. So, what will be your short term and long term goals in writing?
Well, this one took me a few years, Daniel, because I was working full time while I was writing it up until the very end. So I just want to, enjoy this book for now and see what comes from it. But of course, I also have future books in mind as well. There's a couple of hints in this book as to what a future book might look like, and always looking out for those new opportunities of what's next, Daniel. So I'll have to say watch this space for that one, but there's definitely lots of options out there.
Good luck to your goal, whatever it is, Miss Joanne. So, how do you suggest professionals approach conversations with their employers about moving into a management roles?
Yes, I think that's a great question. And hopefully, the managers that they have are engaging in career based conversations with their direct reports. But if they're not, then it's definitely an opportunity for us all to raise the topic with our current managers. One word of advice there, Daniel, and I mentioned this in the book. If you do want to be a manager, not a good idea to go to your manager and say, I want your job, right? That could be a career limiting move for a lot of people. So, but they can say, I would love to look at working towards a job like yours. That's
Certainly.
same language, but and then have a conversation with their managers around the type of skills that their managers currently perceive that they bring to the table, and the skills that they can maybe start working on, and be open to the feedback from their managers, even if they don't agree with the perception that their managers have of their current development areas or their current strengths. That's fine, just take it on as information, and then ask your manager real questions around what are some of the things I could be doing differently, or what are some of the things I could be doing more of in order to be successful in my role, and really try and drill down or ask your manager for those specific behaviors of things that you might need to start doing more of or start doing differently in order to be successful in your role. It's also nice for them to ask, what are my strengths? What do you really appreciate about what I bring to the table? And the answer to those questions might be might be something that they already know, and that's great. But they also might be pleasantly surprised by what their current managers are identifying as some of their strengths. Because I truly believe that managers are in an ideal position to tap into potential that that their direct reports are not currently aware of. Imagine if and we've got to be open to looking at engaging in new skills and learning new skills. Imagine if, I'm going to age myself now, but imagine if Elton John never started twinkling on the piano, or imagine if John Lennon never picked up a guitar. Who knows? Like, that would just be horrible. We wouldn't have had the wonderful experiences of their music. So from that, I think it's a great idea to check in with our managers around what they perceive we're doing well, and double down on that. And to also be curious about what we could be doing differently or more of, really getting our grasp around some of the behavioral elements of that, putting that into practice, and then shifting those perspectives. Because, Daniel, if anyone has got a negative perspective of us or something that we are doing, the only way that we can change their perspective is by changing our behavior, and doing it on an ongoing basis, on a repetitive basis. Because the nature of, human nature, the way our brains work, is to always try and perceive what we're doing wrong, or
Yes.
what's wrong with a situation or circumstance. I think it goes back to our evolution as human beings, understandably, right? If there was a saber-toothed if there was a rustle in the bushes over there, and we went over to see what it was, and it happened to be a saber-toothed tiger, we learned pretty quickly that that was a bad idea. So we're often looking for what's wrong with something or negative. So we need to have a little bit more of an open mind, particularly around our own development and what we can be doing more of, understand the negative nature or other people's negative perceptions, and then change our behavior on an ongoing basis to change those perceptions over time.
So before we wrap up our discussion, Miss Gianna, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Music 101, and it's third season, people, third season with
Congratulations.
Mr. Jim Mick Smith. Music 101 is created to empower music itself and legendary icon in the music industry. So please do listen, Music 101, wherever you listen your podcast. Will you be my guest on Music 101, Miss Joanna, and let's sing together?
Oh, I'd love that. Let's do it, Daniel.
Let's do that and let's promote your book over there. I have a different audience on Music 101. So, how does your personal experience influence the stories or advice shared in the book?
Well, we've all, like I said before, we've all had great managers and we've all had maybe not so great managers. And I've trained hundreds and hundreds of managers to be great managers all around the world. And it's something that I'm super passionate about. I think that a management role is one of the most important jobs on this planet. To be honest, I mean, let's face it. Usually, unless we're an entrepreneurial, we've all got a manager. So I think it's one of the most important roles, and it's a privilege, in my view, to be a manager. But we have to be aware as a manager about the impact that we potentially have on other people, and we have to be cognizant of the impact that we want to have. So in my book, I ask everyone to think those two questions: what impact do I want to have in a future management role, and why is it that I want to be a manager? And if you can answer those questions in a positive light with your hand on your heart, I have no doubt that you will be a successful manager moving forward.
Miss Joanne Merrick, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your book? Game on!
Thank you. Yes, please do.
So, where they can buy your book, Miss Joanne?
From Amazon, Game On is Management Your Best Career Play. They can grab it from there. They could also check out my website, which is theleadershiprecipe.com. So together we can create the best recipe for your success. And they could also email me at joanne at the leadership recipe, and I'd love to connect with you.
Yes, people support Miss Joanne Merrick because if you support her, more and more and more empowering books like this to come. So, Miss Joanne, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Daniel. It's been a pleasure.
More to come, people. See you soon.